How are you? Welcome. I can't even see from the steamer. Today I want to cook for you dishes from the courts of Peking. People are always asking me, what is your favorite meal in the whole world? And it really depends on what I had for dinner the night before. But I do think the Chinese have got to be the most efficient and clever cooks in the world. And the courts of Peking in the old days, a couple of dynasties back, you see, turned out dishes that were so complicated and so flamboyant that you and I have just got to share them. I am cooking for you today a Peking duck, and he's drying right now. He's been hanging here for about 8 hours. I'll turn off the fan so we can talk. It's a very complicated dish, but with a little care and a little time in your own home, you can do it. And let me show you how. It's a great thing for Peking duck, Beijing duck, you see? Sounds like you're calling for him, doesn't it? But you're not. There, all right, let's get a duck in. Let me show you, first of all, how to prepare the duck. You must sew him up carefully. In Chinatown, in San Francisco, or New York, or Chicago, they would never buy a duck like this. They buy a duck that's whole, but the duck that you and I buy has been cut viciously. So we have to sew him up carefully, and I'll show you what I mean. Here you have, you see, the duck himself has to be sewn up. I've started with the neck, and I very carefully threaded in. Let me get this so you can see it. There he is. I've put in needles. You see, you buy the duck needles or chicken needles, turkey needles, whatever they call them. Put them through and then sew him up very, very carefully. I'll show you how to do this in a minute. But he must be airtight. And then you do the same with the other end, with the rear end of the duck. You see, we're gonna fill him up with a lovely sauce, which I'll prepare for you now, in an effort to make a very complicated, involved, and lovely dish called Peking duck. Very, very fun. You know, in China, there are restaurants in Beijing that argue about who's the best duck cooker in the whole country. And I'm not sure how the argument goes, but they have restaurants called Little Duck and Big Duck and Medium Duck. And you can go to these places and get in on the argument. I'd love to do it. All right, in our wok then, to prepare the sauce, we're going to add a chunk of orange peel. Just a bit of orange peel right off the old slicer here. Take the peel right off the orange and throw them in the wok. And remember, now heat your wok first, or your frying pan. You don't need a wok for this. Heat your frying pan first before you put in any oil. Mine's already hot. So in goes a bit of peanut oil. There we are. And some orange peel. Sounds like a strange recipe, doesn't it? I want a couple of green onions, just chopped up. These are going to go into the heart of the duck, into the center of the duck, you see, so they don't have to look one way or the other. Doesn't matter. In they go. Now we're going to saute that for just a very, very short time. And I think we'll add a couple cloves of garlic too. And the quickest way that you can clean garlic is to simply lay it down on your board, you see. Just lay it down on the board, and instead of chop, 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 we're going to lay a cleaver on top of it and just go ka-wonk, ka-wonk. And it's now smashed and ready, you see. And in it goes. It's hardly going to kill you in terms of wasting your time, is it? Huh? Works out well. All right, what else do we need? We're going to saute that just for a minute here. Saute it, chow, stir fry. That's what the term chow means. See, it means that it's been fried at very high heat for a very short time. Now then, we're going to add to that about a half teaspoon of salt. That quickly. And we're going to add a couple teaspoons of sugar. And I want you to use brown sugar. That's much more typical of the kind of sugar that they use in China for cooking. It's almost a raw sugar. So brown sugar comes pretty close to that for us. And we want some Maincy. And Maincy may be hard for you to find. If you can't find it, don't worry about it. But it's sometimes called soybean jam or soybean condiment. It's a very strange bit of soybean that's left over on the bottom of the vat after you've made soy sauce. And they add a little garlic to it, and it becomes a delicious condiment. It's almost a meat replacement in China. Very, very good. All right, we'll keep chowing away here till we get our sauce all ready to go. I love to do this kind of cooking. I think the Chinese are so ingenious, but it's you know, you don't do this in a hurry. The Chinese spend more time anticipating and preparing for a meal than any culture in the world. And in the courts of Peking, where they made Mandarin cooking, that is to say, high class. And that's all the term Mandarin means. It means that it's very involved, it's very aristocratic. So you could have Mandarin in most communities in China. You see, high class or aristocratic cooking. But most of the royalty hung around Peking for many dynasties. So when they say Mandarin cooking on a restaurant, what they generally mean is Old Peking, Old Beijing, excuse me if you're Chinese. That's the way it's pronounced now. Beijing, Beijing, all right? So, well, I continue to cook in our wok because we're anticipating one of those dishes that takes a long time to prepare. And now we're going to add half a cup of hoisin sauce. You can buy this in any supermarket in our time. Isn't it great that the world is finally available to you through a supermarket? It's just terrific. You can buy anything from any place you want. That was not true even 10 years ago. Half a cup of hoisin sauce, which is a very heavy, sweet, peppery barbecue kind of sauce. And we want a couple tablespoons of soy, and I'm using a light soy. I don't want something too full of sugar or too full of salt because I can't control the salt and sugar that way. You see? All right, now we'll let that simmer for a bit. I need about a half a cup of chicken stock. I'll give you the recipe for the sauce again, and then the rest of the dish will be easy. Half a cup of chicken stock. Let that simmer for just a few minutes. There we are, exactly half a cup. Terrific. And we're ready to go. Let me give you the recipe for this sauce again, which is going to go in the belly of our Peking duck. I have a half of orange peel, and I sauteed that with a couple of green onions and a clove of garlic. Then I added a half a teaspoon of salt, a couple of teaspoons of sugar, and I used brown sugar, remember? You want that rather than the old white, you see? It has a lot more flavor. A couple tablespoons of Mainz or soybean jam or soybean condiment, depending which name you can find it under. It doesn't matter if you omit it, it'll be all right. Half a cup of hoisin, that you should not omit. And 2 tablespoons of soy. Sauteed that for a bit, added a bit of chicken broth, about half a cup, and we're set. We're ready to pour it in the old bird. I would let that cool under normal circumstances, but you and I don't have time for that nonsense today, so we're not going to worry about it. Let's see here. Find the spot for everything. Now, I need a holder for my bird. Here's the old duck. I'm going to put him in a colander. It's easier that way. And I'll pour the sauce in using a ladle of some sort. Use any kind you want. Turn off the heat, and we'll just put the sauce into the. You notice I've already gone so far as to seal up part of the duck. You see, so it will not take me quite as long this way. In he goes. You know, I'm doing this show today for my son Channing, the duck man. When Channing was a baby, and I would go to San Francisco on business, I would bring him back a duck from one of the shops on Grant Street or Stockton, and Channing would stand at the airport just as a tiny child and expect that duck to get off the plane with me. And of course the old duck always did, wrapped up in a big plastic sack, and then Channing and I would go home and have duck for dinner, and he was just in heaven. And it should be. That should be the way things are shared among your friends and your family. It should be a great deal of fun, and it is. Okay, you see what I've done? I put the sauce in. Now then, I'm going to fold in the flap of the duck. Look at the mess I'm making. Don't worry about it. Fold in the tail, and if it doesn't break on you, well, you break it yourself. Just tuck it right in there, you see. I'm going to have to break this one. He's a toughie. There he goes. Now we're going to seal him up. He's awfully warm here. If he were ice cold, it'd be a little bit easier to operate with, but don't worry about him. We're going to use some needles to finish the job here. There we go. By the way, I salted this duck before I began sewing him up so that the skin would be crunchy and dry. I put in quite a bit of salt, but the salt will run off the duck. You know what I mean? There we are. Just seal him up, and I'm folding over the skin as I go along here. That is to say, I'm grabbing a piece of skin and folding it under, thusly, so that I'm going through 2 layers on each side. You got me? I'm going through 2 layers on each side. Like so. Try and avoid your finger. Owie! It hurts. It hurts. It's not a very intelligent way to sew up a duck if you keep poking yourself. And this dish, before we're done today, you're going to say, this time Smith is crazy. He's gone over the edge because this takes a long, long time to cook a duck this way. But when you finally come to the table, when you finally have that great taste, that big moment, you see, when everyone in the family says, oh my God, you've done it, then it's worth it, isn't it? That's why I cook. I cook because I have an ego the size of a moving van, and I want everyone to be happy and joyful when we finally eat together, and to tell me that I'm marvelous. I love it. I just love it. Sit up, fella. One more here, and then we're going to, maybe two more. Then we're going to thread him up, and I'll show you how to sew him. Then he's going to go into a vat of honey water. But first we're going to cause the skin to separate from the rest of the body. And wait till you see how I'm going to do that. Just wait till you see, because you're going to have to do it too. Once your junior high school son sees you do this, it's all over. He's going to want you to make it often. All right, out of the rack and onto a towel or something. You can hold him here. I'm going to use my big white towel that I stole from my bathroom here. You see, he should not be leaking. You remember I put sauce in him? Should not be leaking from the neck. He's sewn up very carefully. Take some time to do this, and we'll hope that by the time we finish with him, he'll not be leaking from the opposite end. There we go. Some thread. Notice I'm using some very strong string, but I'm going to dip it in water first, because that way, when the string is tied, it's less likely to slip on you if the string is wet. Okay, duck, here it is. This is our big moment together, friend. Now begin thusly, you see? And we're going to throw the string through the loop twice rather than just once, because it's much more likely to hold on. That's called the old A&P knot. It was used in the days when supermarkets used to put your groceries in boxes, and the fellows would put up flaps on the side of a box and they'd tie them with the old A&P knot, because that meant you didn't have to have someone come and hold on to the, put your finger here, that sort of thing. It would hold by itself. Double loop and it'll work. I think that's called a double granny or something. No, that's different. That's not it at all. Just keep this up until you can tie the old bird into place. It's a marvelous process, and it's very time consuming. But the result is worth it, because a duck in a restaurant will cost you about $25 or $30 prepared this way. And the price is fair. I've missed a needle here. There he is. The price is fair at that kind of market, you see? There he goes. Okay. At $30 or a dinner for one person, that's a little much, I think. And you and I can do it at home for much less money and have all the fun of celebrating Beijing cooking. Okay, one more here. We'll come clear down to the end and tie him up, and then we're going to pump him up. If you can believe this, we're going to pump this rascal up with a bicycle pump, because it'll separate the skin from the body. In the old days in China, they used to wrap up the bird, as I have just done this, you see, tie him up carefully, and then they had a little child come in, and he would put a bamboo reed underneath the duck and begin blowing on it, and it was a terrible thing to do to the poor child, because he would become, mentally deficient after a while. It was tough on the old crowd, you see. Crazy way to go, but in the old days, in a lot of cultures, we did very strange things. Very strange things indeed. There we go. Getting them all tied up here. All these needles look like a surgeon run amok, don't they? Acupuncture duck is what this is. Okay, well, you get the point. Let me show you how to blow him up. Ralph, I'm going to need some help, if you would. Okay. If you seal him up properly, I'm just going to hold on to him, because I don't have time to sew this rascal in the short time we have. This is Ralph, who's the guy that you wonder about. Who helped Smith with all this stuff? Well, this is the man. He's good at it. Okay, Ralph, let her rip. Now watch what happens. You're going to hear horrible noises from this bird. Look at the skin separating. You see? You see? Isn't that marvelous? Look at him. Isn't that incredible? You see? The skin separates from the whole bird, and if you haven't, he's going to collapse now if I take my hand off, because that hole has not been sealed up properly yet.